Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is replenish. Today's verb was another suggestion from the viewer Louise. Thanks for this great idea. Let's take a closer look now at the definitions or the ways that we use the verb replenish. The first way you might encounter this verb is to mean to fill something up again. Our verb of the day here has a prefix, a re, right? So what we look at today, we're going to notice a lot of explanations or definitions that use that idea again. Okay? So you might think of we're using all of something and then we're putting more of it back into a particular container or space. Related to this is the second definition of the verb, replenish. That's to restore or restock something to a former level or condition. If you are someone that works in retail, so places where items, things are being sold, right? Sometimes all of an item might be purchased during the course of the day. So you might need to replenish or put more things out on the shelves or on the racks, depending on what kind of store it is. For now, you should know that the verb replenish is a regular verb. To make the progressive form of this verb, all you need to do is add ing to form replenishing. The past tense and participle forms of this verb can be made by adding ed. Our base verb, replenish, ends with an unvoiced sh or sh sound. This means our ed ending is going to make a t sound. So when we say the past tense or participle forms, it should sound like this. Replenished, replenished. Okay? Now, there is a phrasal verb that you might encounter with our verb replenish. It's to replenish with. This can have a couple different meanings. The first goes back to an earlier definition, so we're refilling something with maybe some type of substance, a supply, some type of commodity. You might think of like a natural resource. An example of this might be, we must replenish the closet with supplies. Okay? Here, we don't know what kind of business or maybe it's a classroom, right? But we know that more things need to go inside of it. So we're going to be filling it maybe with supplies that are related to the work or the type of studies that are being done at this place. A second way to use replenish with can mean to nourish, promote, or inspire someone or something. So many times when you see this second usage for replenish with, it usually has this rather positive meaning. We might be talking about something you can't necessarily see or things you can't necessarily touch. But many times you might see things about replenishing energy, right? Kind of nourishing, promoting, sort of restoring that, as well as other emotions. That's going to be my example here. When my students share their successes, it replenishes my soul with joy. Okay? Most people can find kind of happy or positive things about the work they do. But I think every job also has its challenges, things that maybe make it difficult to get up and get out of bed and go to it. So if you can find things that kind of lift you up, and for me, this is a true sentence, I feel, very nourished, very inspired. Like I want to keep doing more and more when I hear how certain lessons or classes helped someone reach a particular goal. What you might notice from both of my examples here is that we tend to separate our verb and our particle. the word with. So you're usually going to see something come between, right? And that is the thing that is being refilled, or the thing that is being nourished or promoted. Okay. Now let's move on and do a little more verb tense practice. Today, we'll practice the past progressive and the imperative. Let's start with the past progressive. Now, many teachers and textbooks will call this past continuous, and that is just fine. Both past progressive and past continuous mean the same thing. They're referring to describing an action that was ongoing during some period of time in the past. Right? So the idea here is that something is progressing or something is continuing. The reason I choose to say past progressive in most of my classes is that I try and help my students remember 2 P's in the name of a verb means you need 2 parts or 2 words to make your verb. So here we're going to be using the past form of be, and we're going to use the ing ending for our verb. So the past form of be is our only verb with 2 forms in the simple past tense. This means that we need to pay attention to our subject. So if our subject is I, he, she, or it, we'll use was and then that ing form of the verb. But if our subject is you, we, or they, we'll use were, W-E-R-E, and then the ing form of the verb. Let's take a look at an example sentence. The hospital was replenishing its supply of personal protective equipment when the pandemic started. Okay. Now, you might be thinking back to about 4 years ago and some of the challenges and problems that many medical offices, hospitals were facing. They did not have enough equipment for their medical professionals to wear so that they could be protected from COVID-19. So here we were describing an action of ongoing, sort of restocking, getting more masks, getting more shields, getting more disposable types of things for one's clothing. Okay. Now let's move on and talk about making negative sentences in the past progressive. To do this, again, we always start with our subject. We use was or were, then not, and then our verb with ing. Now, sometimes you will see were not combined into the contraction weren't, and sometimes you'll see was not combined into the contraction wasn't. Let's look at an example sentence. They weren't replenishing fuel in the emergency generators, and that is unacceptable. Okay, so here, maybe this fuel was being used, but it was not being refilled or replenished. Okay. Now let's look at using or forming a yes or no question in the past progressive. To do this, start with was or were, whichever form matches your subject, that subject comes next, then use the ing form of the verb. Here's another example. Was the city replenishing the sand on the beach last week? Right? So, as you can see here from all of these different examples, there are all sorts of things that can be replenished or we could get more of in different environments and places. Now let's move on and talk a little bit about the imperative. The imperative is also described as commands. It's where we're telling someone or some group of people to do a particular action. It is unique in English because we do not have a stated subject. You're probably used to me starting most of my sentences. Start with a subject. I, you, we, they, he, she, it. We're not going to do that here in the imperative. And that's because the subject is implied. It means we can understand what the subject is. So our subjects in the imperative are you singular, if you're talking to one person or you're writing, communicating to one person, or you plural, in case you're talking to many people. So you can just begin a sentence with your verb. You're just going to use that base verb. So here's an example of an affirmative or positive imperative. Replenish your toothbrush every 3 months. Okay? This might be some advice your dentist gives you, right? So they want you to get rid of the old and get a new one about every 3 months. Now, sometimes as I talk about this imperative with my students in classes, they tell me, wow, Katie, this seems very direct. It might seem a little rude for me just to tell someone to do something. So you can always add please to the beginning or please to the end of a sentence if you want things to feel maybe a little more comfortable or more polite. That's true in the affirmative or the negative. But let's talk about making negative imperatives or negative commands now. To do this, start with do not and then the base verb. You could also use the contraction don't and then the base verb. Here's an example of that. Don't replenish the spices now. They're good for another 6 months. So here, maybe somebody is thinking like, oh, it's time to throw this out and buy new, right? Someone else is giving the command, do not throw those things out. Don't buy new ones. We can still use what we have. Now, let's spend a moment talking about some words that are related to our verb replenish. The first word we're going to discuss is the noun replenishment. This is the restoration or the restocking, the resupplying of something to a former level or some type of former condition. An example of this might be, the fund's latest replenishment was pushed up due to the pandemic. I saw this noun being used in a newspaper article describing a charitable fund, right? So where a bunch of money is collected and then given out. And this particular fund, I think, would do distributions maybe like every 5 years, but they've been pushing up that date or pushing up the frequency because of kind of the after effects of the pandemic and how many different groups and organizations continue to struggle after COVID-19. Another related word you might encounter is the adjective replenishable. This means able to be replenished. An example of this. Is this groundwater replenishable? Right? This is something that's going to come up as we talk about a lot of natural resources. As we use something, right? Will there be more? Will this be able to regenerate or be restored? Another related word for us today is the noun replenisher. This can be a person or a thing that replenishes, so restocks, resupplies something. An example of this noun in a sentence might be, this electrolyte powder is a great replenisher for people who do long workouts. So here we're really kind of talking about a supplement, maybe something your body needs to continue to thrive, perform well, perform tasks, and not just be right after maybe a 2-hour or 3-hour workout. Again, my thanks to Luis for suggesting the verb replenish. If you have an idea of a verb for a future video, please leave me a comment. But thanks to everyone who's watched today's video. I hope you all have a great day.